Yeah, thank y'all. And, we are happy to be a UC Davis represented organization. On our board is Simon Atkinson, who is the, I think, Vice Chancellor of Innovation. And so, with Chancellor May and all the people and leadership there at Davis, it really is a chance for us to engage with the student population and the faculty to make sure that our clean tech ecosystem is connected to all that UC Davis does. You think about evolving to meet the industry. Our name is Cal Epic, which stands for California Energy, Power, and Innovation Collaborative. Our previous organization's name was the California Mobility Center, but people didn't understand what mobility meant, and often we got called to talk about elevators or wheelchairs or different types of things. So it was imperative that we change the name. And when we think about innovation, I like to say, it is really something that is better described as a feeling or something that we see and we just know what innovation is. And for a lot of people, I ask them to remember the first time that they were in an electric vehicle and the driver put their pedal down and the feeling of instantaneous acceleration and melting kind of into your seat and your head falling backwards against the headrest and describing that as what innovation is. It's something that you feel and you realize that things aren't going to be the same ever again. It's interesting because your class and probably a lot of your lived experiences, come from some time spent in China, where the technology and the innovation sector is so much more accelerated than what we see right here. And so for us, it really is trying to describe a future that for a lot of people in California or America is mysterious. But in reality, we get to see what China's doing and think about that being, 10 years into our future. And so what we hope for as a nonprofit based in Sacramento is how do we work with the government, the regulatory bodies of the Air Resources Board, the California Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, our elected officials at the state legislature and the governor's office to reduce that gap and to make sure that California is quickly catching up to what is possible and what we see from Chinese manufacturers, research and development agencies, and to think of a future that is based in carbon-free electricity or net zero carbon production of energy and transportation technologies in a way that we can boost our energy grid, make it more reliable, make it more resilient, and then also make our transportation options and our off-road options zero emission. So over the last couple of years, we have really focused on seeding kind of our region. So that means how do we train groups of individuals so that they are familiar with the technology that is here, that is to come, and that will be available in the transition to next generation energy and transportation endeavors. So we've trained over 700 people. Now that number is getting close to over 900 people in the last 3 years. And it really is identifying that a lot of the people in our training programs are looking for new chances to be involved with economic growth and workforce development. So we see them coming to us with some high school backgrounds, usually a little bit of college, but probably haven't graduated a four-year institution and probably haven't gotten their associate's degree at a community college. The majority of our trainees, not surprisingly, are minorities. So we really look at the Southeast Asian population, the Hispanic population, the African American and Black population, and the refugee population has been growing. So a lot of people coming to us from Ukraine or different parts of Asia and Africa, depending on geopolitical crises. And what we try to do is make sure that we have a good relationship with local organizations like Asian Resources Incorporated, La Familia, Urban League, St. John's Program for Women and Children, so that we can use them as trusted partners to integrate those populations into our program. One of the programs that we're really, really proud of over the last year and a half is a partnership with Rivian Automotive. And how many people, with a show of hands, know what a Rivian vehicle is, or have seen it, or have driven it? Okay, so we got a couple. We got three. So Rivian is similar to Tesla in that they are an all-electric vehicle manufacturer. So they don't dabble with internal combustion engines. They focused on two types of vehicles for the kind of commercial groups and the individuals. It's a R1T, which is their Generation 1 version truck, and an R1S, which is their SUV, 3 rows, seven-seater. They also have a delivery van that is all electric that is being utilized by Amazon to a lot of their communities. So if you see a zero emission Amazon van, that's a Rivian. Last year, we reached out to them and we partnered to become one of 5 national centers for their workforce development program called their Technical Trades Program. It's Sacramento, it's, I think, Oregon, Illinois, Texas, and somewhere in South Carolina. And so it is nice for us because it fills a void in the Southwest to train EV technicians, so the people that are going to be fixing your electric vehicles. And it's paid. It's a now 20-week internship. So even from giving you this slide, we've just worked with them and they've extended it 5 more weeks. They participants are getting $24 an hour full time. They're also getting benefits on their health care coverage. And at the end of the program, so at the end of 20 weeks, if they fulfilled all their requirements, they are walking right into a contract offer from Rivian for employment. So it's a great example of education to employment pipeline. And I'd love to get feedback after the presentation on, is this something that we're seeing Chinese manufacturers do also? Is because when you have a paid program where the participants don't have to worry about anything else and they're being trained explicitly on the kind of career opportunities and the programs and the needs of the employer, it makes for a more successful cohort. So there will be greater retention rates, there will be greater productivity, and the company will be able to be profitable that much quicker because the training is embedded with their own curriculum. So we try to now use this Rivian program as a model for other companies. And the next type of industry we're looking to bring in is going to be the battery industry and the EV charger industry. On your screen, you can see that our technical trades programs are graduating. We had a picture, we have them hold up certificates. And then on the right side, you kind of see what our facility has been designed to emulate, and that is the inside of a national Rivian service center. So those are the same types of equipment that they would be working on for Rivian. We bought those same exact pieces. They train on the same exact tools. They use all the same things so that then when they go to the facility after their training program, they have worked with this and done countless hours of preparation. The next slide we have is our, 2026, really proud of this grant from the California Energy Commission to be California's home for what they call Charge Yard. And it's a EV charger interoperability and conformance testing center. So we will have the charging companies have their equipment with us, and then we'll have the vehicle manufacturers have their equipment with us, and we'll provide a space for companies to test equipment on each other. Does the charger work when it plugs into the car? Does the car work when it's plugging into the charger? Is it doing what it is supposed to do at the rate of charging as it's supposed to be charging at? Obviously here, comparative to Asian countries, like we still are very slow on our charging standards. And so this is going to be a partnership between us a nonprofit that's an international expert on conformance testing, CHRN, and the Korea Electrotechnology Research Institute, CARI, to figure out how we might be able to globalize some of these charging standards and work across California into Asia to make sure that there are reliability standards, that there's a plug-in charge standard. So when you plug, it just seamlessly charges without you having to get your digital payments or payments out or apps out. And then also testing on things like vehicle to grid, bidirectional testing, and what's next on megawatt plus testing, which is really funny because when I look at the testing news or the charging news, we have companies that are doing a megawatt plus in China for, just light duty personal vehicles. And then here we're just starting to test megawatt charging or 750 kilowatt charging for commercial vehicles. So that's an example of, when we talked about how we're still behind some of the technology tides, like this is a way I think California is describing and wanting to accelerate those technologies from moving forward. On the next slide, um, currently we are in South Sacramento, so probably 25 to 30 minutes from campus for you all. And it's a great space, but it's small and the power isn't as much as we need for all we want to do. So we're hoping that we can move to a new space this year that allows us to grow Charge Yard, that allows us to grow our workforce development programs, that allows us to pre-plan for a battery manufacturing pilot line, and then also becomes a space for students and faculty and staff from UC Davis and Sacramento State and our community college systems to be able to do innovation and prototyping and manufacturing. So ideally, we'd have a space where any one of the students, let's see, who do I want to pick on today? Grace. If Grace, you have an idea and you're like, how do I prototype this? We would have 3D printers and you could work on 3D printing there. And then we'd also have a CNC metal mill drill. So once you've 3D printed it and figured out that's perfect, you could now move it to an actual piece of metal to do five-dimensional milling and drilling of it. And then there's also welding tables, there's other stations so that you can create a prototype or manufacture a set of prototypes to take to an investor or a bank or a company to show that you've solved an issue that they might have, or you've identified what's next in new energy and transportation technologies. So that's where we're hopeful that we might be able to grow in our next year. And that is my recap right there. So I wanted to make sure I had enough time to speak with you all or answer any questions.
Hello. To start off, I'd like to ask, would you say that you've applied a lot of what you've learned in college for the different roles that you've had, and especially right now? Or was like most of it learned as you developed your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my pathway from undergraduate studies to grad school to here is all over the place. So undergraduate work, I was a Bachelor of Arts degree in radio and television, and I was a TV news reporter after that. And from there, I got to interview, governors and elected officials and politicians, and I always wondered why they wouldn't answer my questions. So I took the route to go to graduate school at UC Berkeley and got my master's in public policy, which then put me on a pathway to do more policy work. After graduating from Berkeley, I got a job very quickly for the governor in California in 2013, Jerry Brown, and got to work on things like high-speed rail. I was one of their spokespeople. I worked for the Department of Public Health, overseeing external communications. And then I started getting involved with more of like government relations, policy, lobbying, and advocacy. And I've done work at the California Immigrant Policy Center as their director of government relations. But I kept feeling a pull for climate. I look at it as like the existential threat of all of our lifetimes. And so the chance to work on climate tech really stood out to me. So I've been able to work for an EV manufacturer that made electric school buses. I worked for a consortium that had about 300 members working on clean energy and transportation. And then I got asked to take over as CEO here for Cal Epic. And, for me, this was building something for our region that included UC Davis, that included Sacramento State, that included, local economies and opportunities to try to bring more clean tech manufacturing home and to create economic opportunities for us to do something big here.
Thank you. I had another question.
Mm.
Based on like what you just described, what would say is most like valuable? What are the most valuable skills you've gained that have supported you where you are now? And I know you mentioned the Caribbean Technical Trades Program, but do you have any advice for students who are looking to enter like a similar career path and further expand on the potential opportunities available for UC Davis students?
Yes. Okay. So I might ask you what those questions are again for number two and number three. Um, I would say my tips for being successful or being able to do this work is to always make sure that you're not the smartest person in the room. And if that's true, you got to find a new room. I love surrounding myself with very intelligent people, and I love asking them questions. And it might be the reporter in me from my background, but I know that I am not a subject matter expert on any of these things. And my strength is I like to be able to connect people, which I think is important kind of for our industry. What we can do or what I can do is make sure that the right people are together talking and set up for collaborations or business opportunities. And so I try to make sure that we are bringing in a lot of people with very diverse backgrounds and opinions and what they've worked on and what they want to do, and just kind of lock them in a room together. And you usually see some really fun conversations going on. That's why having good dinner parties is always a highlight. So if you're thinking of something that you can do, is try to have like lunch or dinners and invite just people and get them talking, and then see if you could come up with one, two, or three really good ideas. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs and prototype ideas really, really stem from. On the second part, what classes or courses um, can be taken. I think you guys are so lucky at UC Davis, and my wife's an alum, so I love to support the Aggies in this way. Is that you have these centers, the ITS students, or the Energy and Efficiency Institute, the Lighting Institute, the work that goes on multinational between the United States and China. Like there are so many subject matter experts or people that have interests that intersect a little bit with what someone else is doing. So I kind of think of circles, right? Each one's a circle, and then you can see how much of a concentric circle you have. How much overlap is there, and where are opportunities in that overlap to be successful? What's really exciting about, I think, this class and what you all offer is that you have this direct connection to a worldwide leader on tech, and you understand what it's going to take and how it got to be, in a way that most students cannot even fathom. And depending on how often you're going into China and seeing like what their technology does, it's almost leapfrogging, right? Every month, every year, where we're trying to figure out what is going to have to happen here in California to catch up. And to think that California is probably 5 to 10 years ahead of other states. And so if we're 5 to 10 years behind, other nations, then just how much do we have to accelerate our research development, our funding for pilot projects, our ability to do some of these things. And so what we do at Cal Epic and what I think is exciting is that we try to work with students and faculty and staff and try to give them resources so that they can tap into those ideas to start creating the things that are going to be essential for us to meet these goals as a state. And then there's a third question. I'm sorry. But if I haven't answered it, please feel free to ask it again.
You answered. I think you answered all of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Thomas. I know that the COW Act works with the company, university, and the government. And there are a couple of following questions that I have. Is that how can the COW Act's clean energy help with the AI growing energy demand?
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do we help with like the growth of AI and the energy needed? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and you know, that's like $1 billion question, right? Probably like a $400 billion question. So if you have the answer to it, don't say it out loud until you patent it. Uh, what we are trying to think about is a whole menu of options to provide power and energy to new construction or build outs or generation uses of AI and even quantum computing, right? I don't want to just say AI. It's also quantum computing. It's heavy, like supercomputing, and what the resources are going to be. We know that they are large consumers, and I think there's different studies that try to paint them as different types of consumers. But the grid as it stands is probably not ready for how much of a need and a demand is going to come online because of all this supercomputing. And we're seeing it play out in portions of Virginia and the East Coast where, there's kind of this like AI growth on some of their utilities. So how do we solve for that? It's going to probably be a mixture of renewables plus storage plus generation. So on the generation side, it could be renewables with solar, wind, water. It could be adding a large scale battery, currently probably lithium ion, but we're seeing great technology growth with sodium ion, solid state batteries, iron flow batteries, different types of chemistries that are starting to come online to do more of like the 4, the 8, the 16-hour battery storage. And then you're going to see some continued use, I would think, of internal combustion power generation. So that might be, we don't want it to be gasoline and diesel. It might have to be. It might also be natural gas. It might be renewable gas. It might be, methane. It could be any other kind of thing that's going on there. And then I don't want to say elephant in the room, but like the thing that's always talked about is nuclear. And will we ever see like small modular reactors or nuclear reactors that can power portions of the grid or industrial sites that would be there? Obviously, pound for pound, particulate for particulate, nuclear would probably be the most energy efficient, might be the most expensive and longest to build out. And I think we're starting to see a shift in that you could build faster if you focus more on wind, water, solar with a battery attachment to it for storage to be able to kind of balance out your grid and also gives the utility time to think through it. In this case, also, we do like to think of what would happen if there's a large fleet of electric vehicles that can be bidirectional and power up a building as needed or provide kind of supplementary and complementary power and energy to a fleet or to a data center or AI. It is interesting, I've been at UC Davis for some conversations about how for some period in China there was large battery swapping for trucks and fleets and cabs and taxis, and then how those battery swapping facilities can also serve as virtual power plants. So I think we look at what virtual power plants could do for the grid here, but I don't know if battery swapping can take off here similarly to what was able to happen, in China, where more of the manufacturers were kind of consolidated or worked together. Here, I think you're going to see more manufacturers have their own proprietary technology just so that they can market it differently. So battery swapping is nice to think about, probably not going to happen here. But the virtual power plant idea that involves that with just several batteries that can power up and down is probably how we look at making sure that there's enough reliability and resilience on the grid for AI growth.
Okay, thank you. And I got one more question. So in the future, and I know that you have a lot of different model for Rivian, and I was just wondering that will CalApp expand the country to serve Rivian?
Yeah, yeah, we're excited for a lot of the manufacturers to produce more models. So for us, we're we're looking at R1 right now, and that's what we have our students learn on. Their R2 model comes out. Their R3 model is scheduled for 2028. In that time, there's a hope that EVs become cheaper in America, and there's more manufacturers that can produce an EV under $35,000 because that is their market penetration might grow and be better. There's a lot that depends on the infrastructure. So to your first question, not just AI, but what happens if we have to plan for, you know, 300 million EVs coming online over the next like 25 years, and how does the grid support that? And it's similar to having virtual power plants and batteries and renewables. In California, right, think of almost a self-imposed mandate to try to get to 100% zero emission vehicle for all sectors by 2045 and net zero carbon by 2045. And that's going to put a strain on the grid like we may never have experienced before because it's building decarbonization and energization as well as the transportation sectors. And so for Rivian, really excited. I was just talking to a colleague, um, and the American manufacturers almost are operating with their heads in the sand in some instances of trying to ignore that the transition to electric vehicles is a worldwide phenomenon and is largely, showing that in different parts of Asia and Europe. It's going to be interesting that we want to see what companies like Rivian and Tesla that have only focused on all electric will do when there's more introduction to the Chinese manufacturers in Mexico and Canada and if there is going to be kind of that cross-border pull. It's also going to make everyone have better vehicles, I think, when you go to Canada or Mexico and you experience, some of the Chinese manufacturers and what their offerings are for EV models. I think of it also as how do we accelerate charging because, those EVs are going to be able to charge much faster than what we even see Tesla being able to do right now and have a true gas station experience where you could probably be in and out in 5 to 10 minutes with a full tank rather than, the 20 to 45 minutes that we see. And so, we want Rivian's growth. They're a strong partner. We're agnostic on a lot of our partnerships. So a lot of it's just industry-wide growth and how do we make sure that we're supporting innovation across the whole spectrum. But, for us, that means keeping a very close eye on what's going on around us. And, in some of the instances, we can't see growth in the industry if we don't train the workers. And if the workers don't know how to fix or maintain or manufacture this equipment, then there's probably not going to be a lot of success for the manufacturers themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, so you mentioned previously that you've done a lot of other jobs and then you transitioned to taking over Calendar. I want to ask what challenges you faced in taking over the organization and how that was like for you.
Oh my gosh, yes. And a challenge is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with running a nonprofit or being on a board of a nonprofit or even a student club. You really have to focus on how much you're spending versus how much you're taking in. So for me, I was the third CEO of the organization, and when I came on, it was uh, under the real premise and the promise that we'd have to like get our fiscal house in order. We'd have to act like a nonprofit and budget like a nonprofit and figure out how much money is coming in versus going out. We have an operating budget that's over $1 million. So in that sense, we have to find over $1 million of grants or different partners to come in and donate. What we do and what I think our business model is going to be successful moving forward is grants are going to be a part of it, but we can't depend on it to be 100% of it. And we're going to have to supplement that with membership fees and fees for service. If someone wants to come in and use a 3D printer, how much is that going to cost for them to be able to use or rent space or use for the day or showcase or want to come in and be a Cal Epic member for the year? we have to think through all of these numbers. And you heard my background. I was a TV news reporter. Math wasn't what I focused on during college. So for me, I had to really pivot quickly into profits and losses and balance statements and looking at operational expenses and redundancies. It's been great. It's been a crash course in managing a nonprofit and leading on it. It also requires a lot of partnerships. Some of our strongest partnerships are with UC Davis, Sac State, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, University of California, Berkeley, partners that if they are also going for grants, they will write us in or they will make sure that they advocate for us to get funding. And then we have economic development partners like the California Asian Chamber of Commerce, the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, where they have those business connections where maybe they can reach out and talk to something like a Verizon or an AT&T and T and say, well, Cal Epic does great work in the community. They might be worthy of like a $5,000 or $10,000 gift to help with what we want to do. But yeah, the challenge is every day is something new. And I tell people, I was like, be very careful if anyone asks you to come in and run a nonprofit. Probably say no, or make sure that they walk you through their accounting first.
All right, thank you so much. You mentioned that you work with a lot of different partners, and also in the previous questions, you talked about how you try to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, being that sort of situation. There's this term that's kind of thrown around a lot on university campuses, how networking is really important, and I was wondering how important networking was for you in your career and currently as the CEO of Cal Epic.
It essential, like networking, and it's so broad, right? Like it really doesn't tell you like what networking is. So I think of it in a couple of ways. I've told myself that because everything is so small, right? Because the industries, because the classes, because the departments that we're all in, or the schools that we are all at, the connections aren't that separated. And you'll work with the same people, especially in clean tech. This ecosystem of partners is incredibly tiny, and all of us have worked together on several different projects. So, remembering that and remembering that the person that, might be an intern, might be a boss in 2 years, or that you might come back and work again with someone that you worked with previously. It is a reminder constantly that you want to try to be on your best behavior and try to make a really good impression when you get to talk to people. And some of that is, I have tried to keep two, maybe three mottos in my head on how to be good at networking. And you could write these down. I don't know if they'll be effective for you as they are for me. Um, One is only speak it if it improves the silence. There's nothing wrong with not talking. Especially in meetings, I think that there is a lot of cultural pressure here that everyone needs to say something. And sometimes it is okay to say, I'm I'm all right. Like all the things that have been said have been said. And, if I have a chance to chime in and add to it, great. But don't talk just to talk. Um, Make sure that you have something worth saying when you want to say it. And I think people respect that. Everyone's like number one commodity is time. So if you're at a table and you're like just repeating what someone said previously, those are minutes and seconds that can be spent doing something more powerful. So only speak if it improves the silence has always been something I try to tell myself. Um, the second thing is that I have, and it's this one is hard. So I never want to speak badly about someone that gets the position or the grant or whatever I wish I got instead. And I think that there is a sense that to build yourself up involves taking someone down, and I don't want to do that. And I don't think it helps. It doesn't help because the industry is so small that if this would be something that gets back to someone of like, how did that person get this job, that I was going for? Like, I'm way more qualified than them, or I have better answers, or they're not as good as me at this time. For at some point, you just got to let it slide and let it go and think that it wasn't meant to be, or maybe they are more qualified. Maybe they are a better candidate for that job. And maybe that job isn't the best for you and something better will come your way. But, it's really hard because I think when we interview or when we want something, we see how we're well qualified and positioned. And if we don't get it, there has to be something wrong with everybody else, rather than maybe it just wasn't our day on the interviews or it just wasn't meant to be. And then the last one, I think it's a personal motto is just do the best I can, as long as I can, as much as I can. And if I do it, I feel comfortable living with it. And it also understands that you only have a limited amount of effort, energy, ability, hours, time, right? I think there's a lot of people that are like, I'm giving 110% of myself. It's like you can't. And if you just give as much as you have, and if you feel comfortable and confident that you've done all of that, then at the end of the day, whatever happens, you just have to accept the result. Like you've done your best. And we learned this a lot in like the immigrants' rights world and social justice. It, you give a lot of yourself, right? It's very hard work. It's hard work in that sense too, of that you're dealing with people's lives and oftentimes the worst part of their lives, and it drains you. And sometimes you have to understand that a break is needed. So, you know, if that means that you have to take a break and people are like, you have to give more, and you're like, I can't. Like, and there is a line that you cross, kind of like an EV, right? If you're driving, there's a point where it hits zero and you can't do it anymore. And if you don't have the energy to move forward, you don't have the energy to move forward. And so those three types of things have been kind of mottos and kind of values that I've imprinted on myself. And it's just kind of been something that if I could check those off and feel good about it, then I feel like I'm doing okay on the networking.
Great. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I'll make sure to keep that in mind. And then I had one last question about what you do in your current role, and especially type of flexibility and creative freedom you had in being the CEO of a nonprofit. Right. Or yes, and you mentioned a little bit previously as well about how it's important to kind of when you feel that you're running out of energy to take a break. So I also wanted to ask how you manage work-life balance as a CEO.
Yeah, this is good. And
And we have about 12:30 minutes, and we have two more students.
okay, perfect. I don't know if there really is work-life balance, right? I think you're sacrificing one for the other. It's just, how often can you swing the pendulum back to really balance that? And, I think some of it is just understanding that there will be times where it's more work than life balance. And sometimes to correct it, you have to make sure that you're being thoughtful and considerate and making sure that there's more life balance and kind of rewarding. So part of that also is like if you can surround yourself with very smart people, they can take some of this burden off of you and let you do what you do best. I think people who are around me will say, well, Orville's good at connecting, talking, and fundraising. And, if I have people that can kind of be there for the technical or kind of the more engineering portions of it, then I can not have to worry about trying to learn that on the fly. And, that is an increase in the work-life balance, right? Like if I have to learn engineering or chemistry, I'm obviously going to sacrifice some hours of my day where I could be doing something else. So, try to find a good team and make sure that it is explicit that you want to create that while also understanding that there are times where it is out of whack.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Mr. Thomas. I wanted to ask more about what the Cal Epic business model is like. I know you said it's a nonprofit. I just want to ask what that looks like in layman's terms, because we're not really all business savvy like that.
Yeah. So our business model is a combination of things. Obviously, grants are probably the foundation of a business model for us. And how do we get grants to do research or development or services? And then we start layering on different types of income opportunities. So part of that is now advisory board positions, founding members, regular membership. So different tiers and structures of what that cost is each for each tier for annually. So for us, we look at it as like a $5,000 member, a $10,000 founding member, and a $25,000 advisory board member, and trying to fill in enough of each so that it can give us enough money for operational expenses. So grants are nice, but they're very structured. And when you're operating a organization, you want as much unrestricted funding as possible. And these are things that happen where you need to hire someone or an emergency pops up or you got to fund, an application or insurance goes higher the next day. A grant is going to be kind of constraining you and boxing you into a certain number, and it helps to offset some of the costs. You'll want to build in like your staff time, your hours. Indirect pay will be like your benefits, kind of administrative costs, like how much is a water bottle traditionally that you get for your kitchen, how much are the cleaning, like, and then you kind of multiply that by the hours that you're doing a grant. But it's not going to cover everything. And so you really want to make sure that you've identified sources of unrestricted funding. And that's why it's so important for us as we move forward to grow out our membership base, is because that would just be dollars that come in that provide us with money in the bank account to kind of do anything and everything unrelated to that grant.
Hello, Mr. Thomas. Thank you so much for your detailed answers. Um, I, I changed my question about what I was going to ask you, so sorry if it comes out a bit clunky. But something that you mentioned in your presentation is that the rate of China's innovation in the energy sector has just been leapfrogging ahead of the US. So, at your opinion, do you think it's necessary to have strong strong governmental support from the US or from like local and state governments in order for the US to catch up and be on par with China?
Yeah, 100%. And I think we've seen it in the last 5 years play out. Obviously, in the Biden administration, they passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. They passed the um, tax credit, and that had incentives and rewards for kind of bringing back manufacturing and R&D to domestic locations. So some of these have been kind of outsourced to different parts of the world. And for a company, you want to be able to have certainty. So, Grace, I feel like I'm using you for everything. Grace Corp, you're a battery manufacturer. You want to know that there is money being offered for customers to buy it. You want money to be able to produce the battery, to do the research and development, and so for a small period of time, there was alignment to have all of that manufacturing, whether it's tax credits, whether it's loans that are low to zero interest for manufacturing or building out a plant, or having then certainty that there's going to be a tax credit and a rebate for electric vehicles that use your batteries. So all of a sudden you have this ecosystem of support for the thing that you do. So if you're investing and if you're looking at investors, they see this whole landscape and they're like, yes, Grace's battery is going to have really good sales opportunities. They're going to support her investment so that the workforce can grow faster, and they will support kind of the training of that. And they're going to give her money in addition to the outside private investor money to buy all the equipment that you're going to need. And so if there's the lack of government, as we've seen with the Trump administration pulling all of that back, now there's a shockwave of uncertainty. And so you see private investors take two steps back. And now the companies that were getting ready to manufacture or to kind of put up wind, water, solar projects don't know if they're going to have the same kind of economic formula that makes sense to them, right? Like all of a sudden, these are billion-dollar projects that may not pencil out the same way if they're not getting tax credits or rebates or state funding or incentives. And now investors are looking at that and saying, well, what's our return on investment if we're not going to get that? And if there's no investors, then in turn, your customer is going to have to pay more to make up that, delta between the investments lost. And so now the product that you had isn't going to be, let's just say $20 for your battery. It's going to have to be $55 for your battery. And at that point, your battery is priced out of the kind of marketplace for customers. And so you're not going to sell a lot. It's going to cost you more to build it. And then your returns on the investments of building and your margins are going to be a lot less. So, when we have these shocks, it really disrupts the system. Luckily, California has the ability to backstop some of it, right? Like we are a very large economy. We have focused on clean tech. So there is like up to billions of dollars available annually for manufacturing, for purchasing, for adoption, implementation. The hard part is that doesn't make up for trillions of dollars, right? That's going to be lost. And so this is why, you know, on the private sector, it's important to see, what the actors are going to be doing is because that disruption now, even if it's 2 years, if it's 4 years, might have caused a 10 to 20-year delay on accelerating the growth of that industry. And so for us, and I think in clean tech and climate tech especially, we're seeing this monumental brain drain where research grants are being cut and other countries are offering to backstop that. And so we have academia and faculty and students that now, instead of coming to Silicon Valley, California, or New York or other parts of the country, are going to China or going to Europe or going to different parts of the world and learning and doing research, on what it is. And this is playing out with AI. Traditionally, I think 60% of AI engineers are not born in America. They might come here to do their education, to start on like different nonprofits or startups, but I believe they're Chinese born. And so if there's not going to be that attraction or that magnet for resources to pull them here, and instead, if China or Europe or other countries and continents are looking at investments, they can strategically reinvest in education and research centers and keep a lot of that talent home. And then you'll see the leapfrogging, right? That's why DeepSeek is a real threat to Anthropic and ChatGPT. That's why NVIDIA being able to be here is still one of the remaining like geopolitical power plays that we have on trade. But if you are allowing now NVIDIA to sell all their super chips across the world. And if those chips now become duplicated or replicated away, then what's the big draw of NVIDIA? So if if governments aren't thinking through how their one moves or two moves or five moves impact decades worth of manufacturing, that's where we find ourselves a little short-sighted right now on advanced manufacturing.
If in the future you're gonna go into a business meeting with the Chinese company, what's one Chinese phrase you want to learn from us and to impress your future Chinese business partner? And we have a student online, Zhu Yonglin, and you're gonna teach Mr. Tom's that Chinese phrase he wants to know.
Yes, I think one, also, how are the customs, right? How am I receiving a business card? How am I handing a business card? What are the cultural norms of these meetings? How do I address people? How do I shake hands? Do I shake hands? How do I address someone when I meet them? The second is, you know, I have a lot to learn from you. I appreciate your time and I look forward to a partnership. That I think is what I would like to know because we want to be, as our name says, collaborative, and we'd love to learn from leaders in this technology ecosystem.
I can type it in the chat and then I can like repeat it.
Mhm.
That's exciting.
Okay.
And also the adequate when receiving or giving the business card.
Okay. I see. Sure, for receiving and giving business cards, you in Chinese culture, from what I've been taught, you would usually give it with two hands out of respect for the other person. And then receiving it as well, you would receive it with two hands. 我期待向您学习, which means I look forward to learn from whatever information you can provide for us for the company. It's 谢谢您的时间, which is thank you for your time.
Yeah, exactly. So 谢谢您的时间，我期待向您学习。When you want to have a good cooperation, you want to have a good time with the company, I would say 4 words: 合作愉快. I wish to have a happy time doing business with you. 合作愉快. And 朱云林, can you type it out in the chat for us?
You're
Yeah.
fine.
Thank you so much. Thank you.